Hello and welcome to Buffy and the Art of Story Season 7. If you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you're in the right place. This time, we're looking at Season 7, Episode 21, End of Days, the penultimate episode of the entire series, where Buffy King-Arthurs the scythe from a rock, the gang tries to save wounded potentials, and Buffy faces Caleb once again. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the Awakening Supernatural Thriller series, the QC Davis Mysteries, and the Writing as a Second Career books for writers. Along with a recap of End of Days, I'll talk today about the challenges of choosing which characters and what subplots to focus on at the end of a very long story, using actions, subtle moments, and direct and indirect dialogue to show characters reconnecting, whether Willow's magic, Caleb's strength, and yet another new character are consistent with past Buffy episodes, what happens when you raise new story questions at the 11th hour, and how to satisfy your audience as you wrap up a long-form story. As always, no spoilers, except in the foreshadowing section at the end of the episode. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. End of Days aired the first time on May 13, 2003. It was written by Buffy veterans Jane Espenson and Douglas Petrie and directed by Marita Grabiak. The opening conflict begins right where we left Buffy in the last episode. She is below ground in the vineyard, having evaded Caleb, and she sees a scythe embedded in a rock. Caleb barges downstairs after her. He claims he's not impressed she found it. The question is, can she pry it from solid rock? But before he even finishes speaking, she does easily. And Caleb says, darn. And we go to credits. On return, Caleb suggests Buffy hand that over before she hurts herself. Buffy twirls it and asks, does he want it? He tells her she doesn't even know what she has, and Buffy says, I know you're backing away. The first, as Buffy, appears and tells Caleb to let Buffy go. The first assures him Buffy won't go after him now. Her friends are in trouble. And now Buffy, too, hears the first, and the first says, Faith go boom. Caleb insists he can't let Buffy leave with the weapon, but the first tells him he'll get it later when her back is turned. Buffy runs out and up the stairs. At 2 minutes 31 seconds, the scene cuts to beams falling and fires burning at another underground location. Amanda yells for the other potentials. She finds some alive, many wounded. Violet thinks her arm is broken, and Faith is underwater, but they drag her out. She's unconscious but alive. Suddenly there's growling. It's an uber vamp, and the potentials run. They're a bit confused and turned around, but they get to a space where they think they can defend themselves. An uber vamp leaps from the dark at Violet. Kennedy pulls her away and gathers them all in a group. Kennedy at the forefront. She tells them there's all of them against one Turrican. They can take one of these things, and it jumps toward them. We're almost 5 minutes into the episode. I see that entire sequence to this point as a story spark or inciting incident. We have Buffy getting the scythe, which sets off the main plot, and we have the potentials in great danger, which sets up a sort of subplot of them dealing with these tremendous losses. The scene cuts to the Summers house. Andrew narrates as he spreads out all the food he got at the grocery store, which is basically abandoned. Giles, thrilled, grabs his favorite snack. Xander, Dawn, Willow, and Anya walk in looking dejected. They couldn't find Buffy. Willow says the locator spell took them to an empty house. Buffy must have moved on, because remember, last episode, Faith sent them to go check on Buffy, not interfere, but just see what she was doing, after the first, in the form of the mayor, warned her Buffy might be dangerous to Faith. Giles tells them that Faith hasn't returned with the others. something must have gone wrong. Andrew chimes in that he's been here keeping morale up. Willow says they have to go to Faith. Andrew agrees that they should go. He'll stay and continue keeping morale up. That's important. The potentials underground are ready to fight, but then a second Ubervamp attacks from behind and a third. There's lots of shouting and screaming. One Turrican gets Kennedy by the throat. Looks like it might be the end for her, but there's a loud noise and a shaft of light. The Ubervamp looks over, and Buffy, to triumphant music, jumps down with her new scythe. She fights the Ubervamps. This is really my favorite moment of the whole episode. She kills one, then another, and with a mighty swing of that scythe, beheads the last one. The potentials watch, breathing hard, clearly frightened and then relieved. She tells them to get the wounded. They're leaving. And we cut to a commercial. On return, the potentials bring in the wounded. A few of them carry Faith up the stairs. Kennedy says Slayers heal fast, right? So Faith will be okay. Buffy is not sure. Amanda thinks they got punished for following Faith. It was a trap. But Buffy tells them it wasn't Faith's fault. It could just as easily have happened to Buffy. When one of them asks if she's back, Buffy's not sure, but she guesses she's not leaving. Kennedy asks her if there's a plan as Buffy hurries up the stairs, and Buffy says, yes, get ready, time's up. Amanda repeats that they got punished. I love these reactions to what happened, and it brings to mind one of the things Tiffany Nieheiser said in that episode on grief and the Buffyverse, which is that the bargaining phase of grief is not necessarily, oh, I'll do this and it will fix my grief now, but believing that you, as Amanda suggests, were being punished for doing something wrong is a way of bargaining, because if you do the right thing next, whatever that might be, then nothing else bad will happen. And that really fits what Amanda's saying to me. It seems like she wants to believe if they can make a better choice in the future, whether that means following Buffy instead of Faith or making some other choice, they can avoid disaster. And Buffy is telling them that's not how it works. There is no sure way to avoid these types of things happening. Buffy gathers with her friends in one of the bedrooms and tells them this weapon is some kind of scythe. That's the first time I think we hear it referred to as that, and that it made Caleb back off. Willow jokes, so it's true, scythe matters. Giles says he's ignoring that, but Buffy and Willow exchange a smirk. Buffy then says she senses power when she holds it. There's not much, but she knows it's hers. Willow suggests it might be a traditional Slayer weapon, but Giles can't imagine how they've never heard of it if that's the case. Buffy says the good guys aren't traditionally known for their communication skills, and now he and Buffy exchange a wry look. They're all hoping it's something more than a great weapon. This scene reconnects Buffy with both Willow and Giles, though they don't have a direct conversation about the rift between them, but that look that Willow and Buffy exchange, a little bit of the old humor, this time with Willow making a pun, something Buffy always did, brings them together again, shows that neither remains angry at the other. And Buffy and Giles, Buffy acknowledges a little bit more that something was wrong by her comment on the good guys and communication skills. It's a nice way for her to acknowledge that perhaps she wasn't communicating well and point out that Giles also wasn't, and the look they exchange shows that they both are taking a bit of responsibility. That's a lot to read into those looks, but because we know these characters so well, it works. And this reminds me a bit of the zombie episode in season 3, where everybody was so awful to Buffy, not Giles in that episode because we weren't in season 7, but Willow and Xander and Joyce, and they don't ever talk about it. They just have this big battle together. Well, they do have a blow up, but they don't necessarily mend anything or reconnect until they fight together and Buffy saves Joyce. Here, it is a little more nuanced because they're not fighting a physical battle at this moment, but they are fighting a battle and preparing for it, and in the process, they reconnect. Downstairs, Andrew tears apart bed sheets for bandages, but he's unhappy with it. They are too festive. Anya agrees the potentials will look like mortally wounded Easter basket. A potential lying on a stretcher, one of the very wounded says, "What?" Anya and Andrew share a bottle of scotch as they talk about how bad things are, and Anya calls it a slaughterhouse. And again, the potential says, "What?" Anya tells her, "Stay quiet. Trying to talk will just kill her sooner." Andrew says they need supplies, bandages, stitches, painkillers. He figures the hospital is abandoned like the grocery store was. He drinks some more scotch. He's going in, and Anya's coming with. Anya is excited by the idea, acting like she feels like it's going out on a spy mission, and she says she'll get Kennedy to watch the girls and goes on, "She's tough. Imminent death won't bother her." Once again, the potential is quite disturbed to hear this. This scene, while I enjoy the humor, never quite comes together for me because I am not sure why it's such a big deal to go to the hospital and grab supplies. I don't know if we're meant to believe that the streets of Sunnydale are dangerous even during the day now. That's certainly quite possible, but we have not seen that. We have seen Sunnydale residents fleeing. We just had Xander, Willow, Anya, and Dawn return from going to check on Buffy, and there wasn't a mention of any hazards to them. So it just throws me a bit. And wondering why it would be a big deal to go to the hospital distracts me from the moment and the fun of Anya's dialogue. We're a little past a quarter way through the episode. Usually around here or somewhat later, there is the first major plot turn that spins the story in a new direction and raises the stakes. Typically, it comes from outside the protagonist. I'm not sure if we exactly have that here, but there is a significant scene between Xander and Buffy. They talk in the kitchen alone. He's unhappy with whatever assignment Buffy has just given him, which we don't hear about. He says he'll be out of the fight. He feels like he's being put out to pasture. Buffy says he's not and then asks what that even means. And he says it's like when a cow gets old and loses an eye and can't fight. He tells her he can still fight. He doesn't need Buffy to protect him, and there's very moving music playing as she tells him she knows that. It's why she needs him to do this. Xander says he just always thought he'd be there with Buffy, quote, for the end, end quote. And Buffy says, hey. He backpedals, saying this isn't the end, and he meant in a heroic and optimistic way. She's just thrown off by the eye patch. She tells him he will be by her side. He's her strength. He's why she made it this far. She trusts him with her life, and he says, okay. And Buffy adds that he can't shoot a bow and arrow. He recently broke a lamp, and she worries he'll hurt himself every time he picks up a weapon. He protests, and Buffy says, don't look at me. You're the one who said I'm going to die. He insists he only implied that, which is different. Besides, if she dies, he'll just bring her back to life. So we've got some trademark Buffy humor here from both Xander and Buffy, which I enjoy. That reference to Xander bringing her back to life, both at the end of season 1 when he gave her mouth to mouth, and of course at the beginning of season 6 as part of the spell with Willow. So I really love that, and I enjoy this bit of lightness between them that we don't see that much this season, and certainly didn't last season. And this is that last major reconnection Buffy needs to make. Now she is once again close with Xander, Willow, and Giles. I do struggle a little bit with her speech to Xander about he's her strength, he's why she got this far. But I think that is really because of the things that I've talked about throughout the series, where Xander's character reads a lot differently when we look at him from the perspective of the 2020s versus the late 90s and early 2000s. This reconnection with the three people closest to Buffy is what I see as the major turn, because now they are on the same page and ready to move forward. And I'm not discounting Dawn here, but Dawn and Buffy have gotten along really well this season. And despite that Dawn took part in kicking Buffy out, I feel like there were more issues with Willow, Xander, and Giles being part of that than with Dawn, because Buffy is so protective of Dawn, and I don't think she takes it to heart as much what Dawn did. This scene echoes to the penultimate episode of season 4, where on the way down into the initiative, Buffy apologized to Willow for being so distracted and wrapped up with Riley, and she and Willow and Xander shared a big hug and then shared another with Giles when they reached the bottom. Upstairs in the bedroom, Willow and Giles are trying to find out more about the scythe. I do wonder where all the potentials are now, because they have the bedroom to themselves. We'll later see Faith alone in the other bedroom with Buffy. Xander and Buffy were talking in peace and quiet in the kitchen. It's another example of the struggle to deal with all those characters. And while that inconsistency of sometimes the house is bursting at the seams with all the potentials, and other times when it's convenient, they just are somewhere else being super, super quiet and almost invisible, is one of those things that the first time I watched these final episodes, I feel like was always nagging me at the back of my mind, though I didn't put a finger on it until looking so closely for the podcast. Willow and Giles trade ideas about the scythe, brainstorming. Willow mentions something about a pagan temple. She comes across different weapons online, including an axe that's been lost since the Children's Crusade, where it was said to have killed, children. Giles complains the illustrations in the book are never clear enough and they're running out of time. It is a challenge as a writer to deal with scenes where your characters are researching something, looking at books, looking on the computer, and trading information. And over the years, the writers on Buffy have dealt with this in different ways. This scene is an example of a couple ways to do it. There's humor with the Children's Crusade. There's both of them being frustrated. We get Giles expressing that minor frustration with the illustrations. And now we will get more significant conflict because Willow picks up the scythe, closes her eyes, and holds it, but she says she doesn't sense any of the power Buffy talked about. It must be a Slayer thing. And Giles suggests that tapping into the magics might help. So here's the conflict. Willow is hesitant. If Caleb's afraid of this weapon, it might be really bad for her to tap into it. And she adds that if she tried something big she could change, then it's all black hair and lightning bolts. And she can hardly do a locator spell without getting dark roots. This is a great way to keep the tension higher during this research scene. And it is another moment when Willow's feelings about magic or fears about magic strike me as inconsistent. We have that Angel episode where she did the spell to restore Angel's soul with zero concern about turning into Dark Willow. And I did love patron Melissa's take on that, as Willow in this other place with these other people could be her confident self. And yet we also have last episode when Willow did the spell to make the bringer speak through Andrew, an ancient Sumerian spell. That seems pretty advanced. And yet there wasn't any suggestion that Willow felt uncomfortable doing it or worried about it or that it tipped her over the edge. You could think, especially because Willow's comment about, well, Caleb wants this weapon, And that might be why she fears it so much, because maybe it's connected to the first or dark magic. So that makes her more concerned. But she was tapping into a bringer last week. The bringers are the servants of the first. The first controls them. And yet she wasn't concerned about that, and we didn't see any bad effects on her. This is likely just a result of this being a TV series in the pre-streaming days. So there may just not have been as much communication among the writers or as much awareness of these story through lines. Plus, they're trying to wrap up 7 seasons. So here and there are going to be inconsistencies. In a novel series, the writer would probably go back and take a look, or would do another revision and weave in just a line here and there to show that Willow does have these concerns other places. One line in the last episode could have helped with that and made this more consistent. If you missed the free day for the ebook edition of my Q.C. Davis crime novel, The Forgotten Man, don't worry, you can still check out that series for free by getting the ebook edition of the novella No Good Plays. After solving a crime but losing a friend, Chicago lawyer Quill C. Davis's plans for the summer are to have fun, catch up on her law practice, and enjoy time on her boyfriend's boat. Then Detective Sergeant Beckwell, who helped Quill investigate the death of someone close to her, calls in a big favor. His son's high school basketball coach is dead, and he's afraid his son is somehow involved. Beckwell has it all planned. His ex-wife has a contact at the high school. Quill, drawing on her child stage actress experience, can volunteer in the summer drama program. From there, he expects her to wheedle her way into the school's life, figure out what happened to the coach, and more important, what his son knows about it. Quill fears Beckwell will expect her to cover up what she finds, but she feels for Beckwell, whose son has gone from a confident, happy high school basketball star to a sullen, angry teenager who may want to quit playing altogether. She agrees to investigate, and Beckwell promises not to interfere, no matter what she learns. But is that a promise he can keep? And can Quill find the killer before she becomes the next victim herself? No Good Plays is a novella in the Q.C. Davis mystery series, but it stands alone. If you enjoy quick-witted private detectives unraveling the clues and life and death stakes, you'll love this novella. You can get No Good Plays, the ebook edition, free by going to lisalily.com/no-good-plays. And you can find all my fiction, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books, and all my nonfiction books for writers at lisalily.com. That's lisalily.com. Willow now says she's not sure what will happen if she has to tap into magic to solve this. And Giles tells her, all right, do what she can, that's all they can do. Frustrated, Willow stares at the computer again, and she points out that one of the choices on the site she's on just says M ? This gets Giles' attention. He tells her that's a glottal stop, a universal sign for a sort of gulping noise. And it is meant to symbolize, together with the M, a scythe. It's on thousands of carvings all over the world. Willow thinks it could relate to that pagan temple she found. The idea of thousands of carvings helps a bit with the problem of why they never knew about the scythe or saw any sign of it, because this tells us there were signs of it. They just didn't know to look for them or know what they meant. Giles adds that the scythe is a symbol of death. They should see where the pagans bury their dead. Outside the house, it's night. Dawn tells Xander her crossbow isn't in the car as she hunts through the back seat. She says she told him she doesn't leave crossbows around all willy-nilly. quote, not since that time with Miss Kitty Fantastico, end quote. I do love the shout out to Miss Kitty Fantastico, who I don't think we saw beyond season 4, but very sad end, it sounds like, for the cat. Xander starts talking about his eye and all the stupid jokes people make. Hey, Xander, no more fun and games. Dawn says Giles was just having fun with him. Then she laughs when Xander says something about a cyclops. He tells her he wants more nuanced jokes, an eye for an eye joke or an eye of the beholder joke. They're standing facing each other, and Dawn quietly says she knows. This is a lovely moment between them, where Xander, as we'd expect, is dealing with his sense of loss and this permanent injury through humor. And Dawn is seeing that. She sees that and acknowledges, just by saying, I know, that this is sad for Xander. Then as she checks in the front seat, she tells him it's just that everyone's still on guard around him, but before he knows it, and he catches her off guard by covering her mouth with a rag. She screams and struggles, but then goes limp. He locks her in the car, gets in, and drives away. At the vineyard, Caleb yells and throws a giant wine barrel across the room. It hits and breaks open. The first is Buffy points out that he's wasting a lot of full-bodied Merlot. Caleb is frustrated, Buffy is strong, and he is weak. And the first comments that yes, his strength is waning. It's been a long time since they merged. He says the first might be right and adds, let's do it. The first responds, boy, you sure know how to romance a girl. She keeps mocking him, and he tells her to stop. This is a sacred experience for him. Sounding bored, the first says it is for her as well. But then the first gets more engaged and tells him when this is over, the first will enter everyone on earth just as it enters him. He asks if it's trying to make him jealous, and the first says, I'm trying to make you a god. That comment really interests me, and yet it is frustrating because we did not get a hint of this before. Why does the first want to make Caleb a god, and what does that mean exactly? Because all we're going to see this episode is that he gets super strong. I would have loved to have this comment come much earlier in the Caleb arc or in the season when we could have explored it. They face each other. They both raise their arms out to the side. Bright light comes out of the first as Buffy, and then this creepy, sort of scary-looking ethereal figure, much like what we saw in the library in Conversations with Dead People when the first was threatening Willow. There's flashes, and it enters Caleb. He staggers, hunches over after saying he is the first's humble servant. Now he looks up, his eyes are black, and in a deep, scary voice, he says, and I am ready to serve thee. The idea of the first being able to enter and literally merge with Caleb is another new thing. It addresses why Caleb sometimes seems so strong that Buffy's punch or kick has no effect at all, and why other times she is able to at least get in some decent blows that seem to affect him. So this is one way to deal with a bit of inconsistency in how strong Caleb is. And this merging idea to give him more strength raises the tension. It makes things much harder for Buffy. And if you are going to introduce a new concept very late in the day in your story, it works better if it's something that makes things harder for the protagonist. If it makes things easier, then it just seems too convenient and is really dissatisfying. But even though this does make it harder for Buffy, it just seems like it comes from out of the blue. Why doesn't the first just merge with Caleb every day? We did get hints that when the first said Caleb was the only one powerful enough to be her vessel and that the first could enter him. So I suppose there was a little bit of groundwork laid, but there was nothing earlier in the season, nothing pre-Caleb to suggest that the first could do this with anybody or that anyone was coming that would have this power. Usually, as you are nearing the end of a very long story, you want to be answering questions rather than raising new ones or introducing brand new powers or new things, because the audience knows there isn't going to be time. If you're raising new questions, on some level, your audience worries you're not going to answer the old ones that are hanging out there, and generally, the audience wants all the major questions answered by the end, especially when you're talking about a long-running series, whether it's a TV series or a series of novels or a series of movies for that matter. The thought is, if you know this is the end, you're going to finally find the answer to all those questions that have kept you hanging in there. When the writer starts introducing new things that you wonder about, it can be really frustrating. To be fair, there was a bit of a seed about the first entering people when Willow did a spell fairly early in the season. I can't remember the episode, but she was trying to learn something and she screamed and her eyes went black and she was crying and saying, "Don't make me do this, don't make me do this." And looking back at that from this point, perhaps that was the first entering Willow. And Caleb's eyes do go black after this happened, though it looks a bit different than when it happens to Willow, but maybe. So maybe there is a little bit there. I definitely never put that together until now. And I feel like you would need stronger seeds or more seeds than that to make this really work this late in the series. One more point on whether you need to answer all the questions. Some stories are built such that at the end of them, you purposely do not satisfy your audience. You leave it for the audience to decide some major issue. Always risky, because some part of your audience is going to be very unhappy that they went through all of that and didn't get a clear answer. But it can be a powerful way to end, to leave something up to the audience to decide. If you are going to do that in a series, however, then each installment needs to end that way, or at least you should have many hints that you're going to end that way. If every season resolves, as Buffy does, with a climax of good and evil, and there is a resolution one way or another, we're not wondering how this is going to come out, then the audience especially expects that at the end of the series. They don't expect you to do something different. And that's really important because readers and audience members go to a story for certain things. In my own work, my QC Davis series, I'm not giving any specific spoilers here, but the main character, Quill, always succeeds to a large extent. There may be certain things that don't go quite how she wanted. She might not achieve complete justice every time, but justice is done. And if I were, after 7 books and a novella, in the 8th book, to have her lose or not give an answer, readers would be really upset, because I have made a sort of contract with them that when you read this book in this series, you are going to get that resolution. And that's why it is uneasy to introduce new things and new questions at this point, particularly because Buffy has given us that resolution. And I'm not suggesting we're not going to get the major resolution in the finale, but it adds a little psychological question for the audience. Are the writers going to tie things up? Do we feel safe in their hands? Caleb becoming stronger after the merge happened right around the midpoint of the episode, and it is a reversal for Buffy. I hesitate on saying a major reversal because we don't know yet how much difference this will make for Caleb. He clearly thinks it's going to make a huge difference. So perhaps Buffy is going to be facing Caleb much as he was the first time she went into the vineyard. The uncertainty there makes it a less clear midpoint than I might like. Nonetheless, it's a reversal. The scene cuts to Faith. She's awake but still in bed. She's holding the scythe. She feels the power too. She tells Buffy it's solid and strong, and it feels like it's hers. And she lets it drop on the bed and says she guesses that means it's Buffy's. So another gesture that tells us that Faith still has these feelings about she's a slayer, but Buffy's perhaps the real slayer. And the dialogue adds to that because Buffy sits near Faith and says it belongs to the slayer, and Faith says the slayer in charge she's guessing, which would be Buffy. But Buffy says, does it matter? Faith says that doesn't matter to her, who will lead. And I feel like Faith is genuine about that. But she is struggling with what happened and all the potentials who got injured. So this time it is probably less about envying Buffy, as we'll find out, and more about questioning her skills as a leader. Buffy tells her what happened wasn't her fault. Faith says she's not looking for forgiveness. She blew it. But Buffy points out that people die when you lead them into battle. It doesn't matter how ready or smart you are. War is about death, needless, stupid death. This continues the ongoing theme of the season about war and about battles. Faith starts a story by saying, here's the funny part, and then tells Buffy that her whole life she's been a loner, no ties, no relationships, and Buffy is asking, is that the funny part? Faith continues, nothing that lasted longer than, well, Robin lasted pretty long. Buffy stands and steps away from the bed. Faith and Principal Wood. Faith asks if Buffy and Robin were a thing, and Buffy says no. They were good friends or mortal enemies, depending on the day, and then says, is that the funny part? Faith goes on that seeing all that Buffy had, she felt jealous. But then when Faith was in charge, everyone looking to her, trusting her, she never felt so alone in her whole life. And Faith says that's Buffy every day. Looking sad, Buffy says she loves her friends and is grateful for them, but that's the price of being a slayer. This continues this theme of season 7, which we heard a lot about in conversations with dead people, about Buffy feeling alone, about Buffy being disconnected. And we have, of course, through the series, heard about the one and only Slayer, one girl in all the world. So we're tying that directly here, that being a Slayer is why Buffy feels isolated. And yet, last week, when talking with Spike, Buffy said being a Slayer made her different, but she chose to stay disconnected, that people were always trying to connect with her, and she chose to slip away. It is unclear to me if she is now concluded because of Spike's speech, perhaps, when he told her she was a hell of a woman, that it is not that she was doing or not doing something, it's about being a Slayer, or are we saying it's both? That is another discordant note for me. I feel like exploring those two things, there's definitely a way you can explore them both, but I feel like sometimes the series is saying, oh, it's this, it's Buffy, the way she is emotionally, and her choice to stay cut off, and other times it's saying, oh, it's because she's the Slayer. Regardless of that, though, I love the dialogue between her and Faith. I love that they can share this and connect, because Faith now says there's only supposed to be one. Maybe that's why you and I can never get along. We're not supposed to exist together. And Buffy responds, also, you went evil and were killing people. Faith says, good point, also a factor. A really nice way for them both to acknowledge one another. Buffy says that Faith is right, though. She guesses everyone's alone, but being a Slayer is a burden they can't share. Faith says, thank God we're hot chicks with superpowers. Buffy responds, takes the edge off. Faith says, comforting. And Buffy says, mm-hmm. Nice ending to this conversation. And I love that Buffy has reconnected with Faith as well as her friends, and the breach between them, which has gone on for so long, feels healed. Buffy walks downstairs in the darkened house holding the scythe. Spike enters, sees it, and says he can see why a girl would duck a fellow for one of those. She apologizes. They get a bit awkward after he tells her that last night was just a glitch, don't make a thing of it. Buffy says, great, she has work to do. She explains she's trying to find out the secret of the scythe. It was forged, and there's something about a tomb on consecrated ground. This is something we didn't hear before. And this is one way to get in exposition by having Buffy tell Spike something that she must have been told by Giles or Willow. I do struggle with it a bit, though, because I'm never quite clear how they find the temple or whatever it is Buffy enters at the end. Spike starts to walk off. Buffy follows and tells him he's a dope. The scythe might help her fight her war, and she found it because of him, the strength he gave her. She's tired of defensiveness and mixed signals. She has faith for that. She doesn't know how he felt last night, and Spike interrupts and says, terrified. Then he takes a deep breath and tells her he can't bear it if she laughs at him. Last night was the best night of his life. It may not mean that much to her. Now Buffy interrupts and says, I just told you it did. Spike says he hears her say it, and then goes on that he's lived forever, but has never been close to anyone, least of all Buffy, until last night, and all he did was hold her and watch her sleep. And he repeats that it was the best night of his life, so yeah, he's terrified. She tells him he doesn't have to be, and he looks at her and says, were you there with me? Buffy says, I was. He asks what that means, and Buffy says, I don't know. Does it have to mean something? He tells her no, then says, not right now. He starts to leave, and Buffy starts to say, maybe when, but he tells her they should leave it, go be heroes. This exchange frustrated me, particularly the does it have to mean something part, because I still don't know what Buffy's feelings are. She's telling Spike she was there with him. She was clearly in that moment with him. We saw that. But Spike seems uncertain about how she feels, and I am uncertain. Partly because of that and partly because of the I don't know. I suspect we're not getting the resolution because Angel appears at the end of the episode, so we don't want Buffy making an out-and-out declaration of love to Spike because she's going to kiss Angel at the end of the episode. I would have really loved to see how this scene might have played if Angel were not coming back, though of course I love seeing Angel again. Two things for this break. First, a reminder that the audiobook edition of my short story collection, The Tower, formerly known as Sears, and two other tales of urban horror, is now available for sale. These are not gory horror stories. They're more like Twilight Zone-like tales. And the title story, The Tower, formerly known as Sears, was made into a short film, Willis Tower, by James Ackerman. You can get the print, ebook, or audiobook editions. You'll find the links at lisalily.com/the-tower. Second, I can hardly believe that this is the second to last Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode that I'll be talking about. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you'll stick with me when I leap over to Angel, the series. A special thank you to the patrons of the podcast. There is a new episode there for you, A Hero Who Makes Mistakes. It's a bit of a look back to the entire series and the times when Buffy has made missteps. Sometimes ones she could have foreseen, many times ones she could not. Remember, patrons also get access to all the past bonus content. Just look in the bonus collections tab on Patreon. And if you're at the $7 and up a month level, or you want to increase to that, you also get a free ebook edition of Buffy and the Art of Story Season 1 and access to my entire online course, How to Plot Your Novel from Idea to First Draft. You can find that at patreon.com/LisaMLilly/shop. And all patrons get access to the first 2 modules of that course free, as well as every regular podcast episode at least 2 days early. If you're not already a member, you can join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLilly. That's patreon.com/LISAM as in Marie, LILLY, for less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. The scene cuts to Andrew and Anya at the hospital. They find some oxygen tanks. Anya makes a reference to a scene in the movie Jaws, and Andrew tells her she's the perfect woman. Anya responds, "I've often thought so." I really love that moment between them. Much of the rest of this scene feels slow to me, though. They go through the supplies. They choose what they need most. There's a little more humor. They talk about the battle to come and how bad it will be. Andrew asks why she doesn't just leave, and she tells him she did that before. Another reference to the past at the end of season 3 when she left before graduation and the ascension. She tells him now she's seen more, she's seen what people are capable of, and realized how amazingly screwed up humans are. They have no purpose. They just drift around, blundering through life until they die, which they all know is going to happen, but everyone is surprised when it does. And they kill each other, which is clearly insane. She goes on, but yet, here's the thing. When it's something that really matters, they fight. I mean, they're lame morons for fighting, but they do. They never quit. So I guess I will keep fighting too. Andrew teases her about loving humans. She insists she doesn't, and she'll kill him if he tells anyone. He says he won't get a chance to. Anya might survive the big battle. She knows how to handle a weapon. She's been in this world for 1,000 years. And he says he's not, so, and he breaks off and then says he doesn't think he'll be okay. Then he adds, I think I'd like to finish out as one of those lame humans trying to do what's right. I do love this last part for Andrew. It shows him truly redeemed. He is facing his very likely death. He had an offer from the first to join the other side, but he is going to fight on the side of the good, on the side of the humans. So he has really changed. Now he suggests a wheelchair fight, and we are treated to him and Anya in wheelchairs, goofing off and fighting each other. I think for Andrew fans, this is probably a super fun scene. For me, the scene could have been half as long, and the whole Dawn story, I'll talk about that later, could have been cut. And maybe we could have answered some of these new questions that the episode raised and that were raised about Caleb in earlier episodes. We're now around 3/4 through the episode. Usually we see the last major plot turn here. It should grow from the midpoint and be driven by the protagonist and spin the story in another new direction and raise the stakes. Most of that happens here because Buffy is stalking through the graveyard, and the narrative will shift to her getting some answers about the scythe and facing another battle. She goes through a creaky gate and into a temple. At least I always thought it was a temple. The Buffy fandom wiki says it's a pyramid, and that earlier Giles or Willow mentioned Egypt, which I did not notice, but it's supposed to be, I guess, an Egyptian pyramid. Buffy kicks the door in. It falls down. It's a heavy door. It falls down stairs to the underground level. There are torches burning. Everything is stone. and an old woman, very old woman with white hair emerges from behind some drapes. She tells Buffy she'd forgotten how young she would be, meaning Buffy, the Slayer, but she doesn't use Buffy's name. And the woman says she was one of many, or used to be, now she is alone. But she is not a ghost. She is as real as Buffy is and has been waiting. She tells Buffy she was one of the ones who put the scythe in the rock. It's a weapon forged in secrecy for one like her. Another new character, very, very late in the day, and many more questions raised than answered. Sure, we kind of literally answer who put the scythe in the rock, but that doesn't answer how she's existed all this time. Has she been living in this pyramid? Does she eat? Did no one ever come in? And why didn't Buffy ever notice a small pyramid in the graveyard? Was there magic that made everyone steer clear? Did the others like her die? We just don't know. And maybe we don't need answers to all of that. But when the appearance of a character raises, let's say, 10 questions and answers one, so late in the story, that is frustrating. Plus, it all feels out of the blue. The woman asks Buffy's name and says, "No, really," when Buffy tells her. She goes on that they kept the scythe hidden from the Shadow Men, and Buffy comments she really didn't like them when she met them. The Shadow Men became the Watchers, and the Watchers watched the Slayers, quote, "but we were watching them," end quote. And Buffy says, "Oh, so you're like, what are you?" I enjoy that she stops from saying Watchers, because we know that's where it's going. And the woman says they were guardians, women who want to help and protect Buffy. They forged the scythe centuries ago, halfway around the world, but it was last used there in Sunnydale to kill the last pure demon that walked the earth. This all feels really convenient and out of the blue that there was this weapon and it killed the last pure demon. And it doesn't exactly answer anything. The scythe itself feels very convenient and out of the blue, and adding all this backstory to it, for me, doesn't make that less so. And then the woman talks about how after that pure demon was killed, and then there were men, and then there were monks, and then a town, quote, "and now there was you," end quote. Buffy asks why they didn't know any of this. It's a question the audience has, so it's good to have the character ask that, and the woman says they had to hide. And she adds, "We're the last surprise." Buffy asks if that means she can win, and the Guardian says it's up to Buffy. She hands the scythe back to Buffy, says it's a powerful weapon, but Buffy already has weapons. Then she tells her to use it wisely. Maybe she can beat back the rising dark. But one way or another, it means an end is truly near. And now the climax starts, where our opposing forces have their final clash and resolve the main conflict, because hands come through the curtains from behind the woman, grab her neck, and snap it. She falls to the floor. Caleb steps out and says he didn't catch that last part on account of the neck snapping and all. And he says, "Did she say the end is near or here?" And we cut to a commercial. So great hook before the commercial. And as I described all this, it occurred to me that maybe a bigger reason why the whole thing about the woman and the Guardian and the backstory doesn't work for me is that ultimately it doesn't matter, because Caleb shows up and kills her, and we get the battle between Buffy and Caleb with the scythe, which could have happened without any of the backstory. You could lift the woman right out, would not change the action at all. And while we would still have the questions of where the scythe came from, and I do think it matters to answer them, generally at this point in a very long story, the exposition should have been long finished, and we should just be driving toward the climax. On return from the commercial, we get a little sidestep from the climax because there is a car driving alone at night on the highway. Dawn wakes up in the passenger seat, very confused. Xander tells her he used chloroform, which she at first thinks he said color forms. She's angry. He hands her a letter from Buffy. Dawn reads it. We hear some of it in voiceover. Buffy telling Dawn not to be angry at Xander, that this isn't the place for either of them, meaning at the battle. And Dawn pulls out a taser and tases Xander. She grabs the wheel. We hear tires squealing. The car pulls to a stop, then makes a U-turn and heads in the opposite direction. First, I'm a bit distracted because I don't quite buy that Dawn could manage all that, or anybody could from the passenger side without crashing the car. My other challenge with this scene, as much as I love the Xander and Buffy talk and I love the Dawn-Xander moment together, the whole subplot feels like a waste. There are so many questions this episode raises about how Buffy found that pyramid, who the guardians were, why is there this whole deal with the first merging with Caleb, what does Caleb being a god mean? And instead we are spending time not just on wheelchair fights with Anya and Andrew, but on this subplot with Dawn that, too, you could just lift right out and it would not matter. If it were something that addressed the Dawn-Buffy conflict, the fact that Dawn did tell Buffy that Buffy had to leave, I could have been on board with that. I'm okay with that not being directly addressed because I think Buffy's protectiveness towards Dawn gives Dawn a bit of a pass. But that would have made more sense to me, this whole thing of Buffy sending them away and Dawn bringing them back. To me, all it's here for is to play out that moment in Conversations with Dead People where Joyce, or the first as Joyce, told Dawn that Buffy wouldn't be on her side, that when it was important, Buffy would turn against her. So this apparently was it, Buffy sending Dawn away. And that just feels so anticlimactic and unnecessary. I like Dawn having an important part, but for me, this shouldn't have been it. One justification I do see for it, and this is important, is I completely believe that Buffy would try to get both Xander and Dawn out of the fray. As she said in one of the season 3 episodes, better if Xander be fray adjacent. So maybe this was needed, but there probably could have been a quicker way. Back to Buffy fighting Caleb using the scythe, but Caleb definitely has an advantage being so much stronger now. She does duck when he punches and she kicks him, but it's more of a struggle, and he tells her she's not slipping out of this fight. She can't stop him. He just keeps going back for more. It's like being reborn. Buffy gets him on the floor on his back. She tries to drive the pointed end of the scythe into his forehead, but he grabs it and pushes back, and he is stronger than she is. Then he gets the better of her, punching her and knocking her to the floor. He grabs the scythe, lifts it over his head, but before he can strike the killing blow, someone says, "Hey," and slugs him. Caleb drops to the floor. It's Angel. He offers his hand, helps Buffy up, and says he was never much for preachers. He tells Buffy she looks good as she gets to her feet, and she says he looks timely. He tells her he heard she might need a hand. And there was a moment, I didn't do the Angel episode because the bulk of it had nothing to do with Buffy, but there is a moment in the previous Angel episode where Angel is offered something to help Buffy and learns about this apocalypse coming. Caleb, very angry, stands staggering a bit. Angel starts to go after him again, but Buffy stops him. This is something she needs to do for herself. He steps back, sits along one of the ledges, and says to Caleb, "You are so gonna lose." Buffy picks up the scythe and swings. It's a really good swing, but Caleb manages to block it and grab the scythe from her. Buffy, though, fairly quickly gets it back, and Angel says, "God, I miss watching this." This too feels a little off to me. I would love to hear from any of you about that. I think because that's not the dynamic they had. Angel didn't sit back and watch Buffy fight. He fought with her. And I get that the show is trying to illustrate this difference between how Angel sees Buffy. She's a hero. He's not threatened by that. He knows she doesn't need his help. He's never going to call her little lady. And Caleb, who is a misogynist. But it just felt a little bit off. Buffy slices the scythe through Caleb's stomach at the end of the fight. He staggers back and he chuckles in this sort of deep chuckle, but then keels over motionless. She has prevailed. The episode shifts to the following action. This is where we tie up loose ends, resolve subplots, finish character arcs, and sometimes continue season arcs. Buffy turns to Angel and tells him, see, it was all under control. They kiss and embrace, and the camera pans back so that we get that romantic moment with them together. Then the camera shifts to the stairway and the shadows of the pyramid. Spike is standing there watching, and the first appears next to him as Buffy and says to Spike, that bitch. This is a great story question to end on, and this is the kind of story question that works when you raise it even late in a long story because it is built on Spike's character. Everything that came before in the series, the rivalry between him and Angel, the relationship between Spike and Buffy and how challenging it has been for both of them, the first having controlled Spike in the past, and Spike continuing to have more of an edge to him. Angel with a soul and without a soul are vastly different for the most part. Spike has been through this evolution, and with a soul, not controlled by the first, he came very close to killing Robin. So there is a lot of question of how will Spike react to that, and that is a great hook to go into the last episode. So this type of story question is organic. It grows from what came before rather than feeling thrown in. Same thing if you are going to introduce a new character very late in the game. It really works if it feels like it is rooted in the story. And that is the challenge with both Caleb and the Guardian. Now, I've talked a lot about what isn't resolved here, about story questions that are not answered and some plot issues, but what did resolve are many of the character arcs and relationships. Faith and Buffy, I just love the way that played out. Buffy and Giles reconnect, Willow and Buffy, Buffy and Xander. These reconnections and pairings might also be why the Andrew-Anya scenes feel a little discordant to me, because the other pairings are resolving and reconnecting. Andrew and Anya don't have a conflict and don't have much of a relationship. So it's sort of that which of these things is not like the others. And it's not that you can't do that, but so late in the story that sticks out more. We also have that lovely moment of Dawn and Xander reconnecting, or they weren't disconnected, but deepening their bond. I like that too. It called back to Potential, the episode where Dawn thought she was a potential slayer, and Xander was the only one who noticed that she believed that, and yet immediately when she realized she was wrong, encouraged Amanda, and he recognizes that, and it is this bond between them. And I like that in this episode, Dawn recognizes Xander's pain and is there for him. And all of this goes to something that Joss Whedon said probably more than once, that if you pay off the emotions, the characters, the audience will forgive a lot of less than perfect plot moments. So that is it, other than foreshadowing for this episode. Thank you again for listening. I hope you'll all come back in 2 weeks for Season 7, Episode 22, Chosen, the finale of the entire series, where Buffy and her army of friends and potentials fight the ultimate battle. And we are are back for foreshadowing, which does include spoilers. There are some hints that Caleb is not really dead. In this episode, Buffy or Angel thought he knocked him out. Caleb got up again. He did merge with the first. We know he's super powerful, and that should have more of an effect than we have seen. So when he is once again a threat, is actually still alive in the next episode, it really works. And from a character and story perspective, we need that to happen because he will knock Angel out and Buffy will fight Caleb and prevail while Angel is out of commission. And that's really important because we want Buffy to win that fight. Caleb has been such a danger to her. He killed and wounded potentials, and Buffy is the hero. Buffy needs to win, not with Angel's help, and not when Angel is sitting on the sidelines and she knows he can jump in and help her at any moment. That's also important so that Buffy is in real peril, which we wouldn't really feel with Angel sitting there. Faith and Buffy reconnecting in this episode and talking about the aloneness of being a slayer is a wonderful way to set up the emotional punch of all those potentials becoming slayers and of Buffy offering them that power that has so much resonance for her, for the potentials, and for Faith. It's not just Buffy who won't be the one and only. Faith, too, will have an entire community of slayers. Willow's apprehension in this episode does a great job of setting up her uneasiness in Chosen about doing this spell with the scythe. I had not noticed that on any previous watching, that she is specifically concerned about a spell regarding the scythe because of that potential for really dark magic, given that the first and Caleb were in league to try to get a hold of the scythe. So that makes it even more of a danger for Willow, puts more at stake, and then amps up that resolution when Willow does do the spell. It works and she feels wonderful. We see that she is tapped into a very healthy magic, the kind of magic that is for good. Andrew and Anya, that scene misleads us a bit, but in a very fair way. Spending that time with the two of them is almost certainly there to build up both characters so that when we see them paired to fight at the end, we are expecting one of them to die. And we think it's going to be Andrew because he has said this, how he's ready for death, and he's laid out the reasons. Certainly, practically speaking, of the two, we would expect Anya to survive just because despite not having her demon strength anymore, she is super experienced, super smart. She's done more fighting than Andrew, and yet she doesn't. And spending more time with her in this episode adds to the emotions of the loss. Earlier episodes with Andrew in Storyteller, telling stories about everyone, the more recent one where he tells the stories about Faith, come to fruition when he tells Xander a story about Anya to make Xander feel better about Anya's death. And Anya's words in this episode about lame humans and standing with them and how they fight to the end, in some ways, make her death more meaningful. We know that Anya understood the risk she was taking. She left before during an apocalypse. So we know that she went into this with her eyes open and made a choice to stand and fight on this side. And much as Andrew did, Anya grew and changed and made her choice. In season 6 and partly in season 7, she kind of was hanging around just to be part of the group or because of Xander, but it wasn't clear where she really fell on morality. There were lots of comments that suggested she didn't quite get certain aspects of Buffy's choices, Buffy's distinction about Spike's intentions versus Anya's. when she killed all those frat boys. And this is a real choice by Anya to pick a side. So I could talk forever. I already have. I will end here. Thank you again for listening, and a special thank you to patrons who support the podcast. Come back in 2 weeks for the very last episode of Buffy Chosen, where Buffy shares her power with all the potentials. Spike plays a key role in battle, and the whole series ends. You can find back episodes of Buffy and the Art of Story, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction at lisalilly.com. To support the podcast, hear extra bonus content, and get each regular episode a few days early, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly. That's Lisa, M as in Marie, Lilly. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman LLC. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.